Right, good afternoon everybody, and welcome to the fourth in our series of innovation talks brought to you by ADF and PCD and PLD in Paris and Packaging Innovations and Luxury Packaging in London. I'm Josh Brooks, I'm the event director for ADF and PCD and PLD in Paris. So I'm in Paris this afternoon. Our speaker Martin Stahl is in London, and wherever you are, welcome. So just like our face-to-face events, as you know if you've been following our series, these online innovation talks aim to bring you inspiration and a new understanding of packaging's key challenges and opportunities. And the aim, of course, is to help you, whether you're packaging designers, developers or suppliers, to connect with each other and create better and more innovative packaging. We heard about the connected consumer in the second of our talks a few weeks ago. And today we're going to take a deep dive into one aspect of the connected consumer and their relationship to packaging. And that is, of course, augmented reality. So Martin Stahl of Zappar, which is one of the technology leaders in the AR sector, is going to take us through the opportunities, the possibilities. And I'm really excited about today's session because it's going to be very interactive. We're all going to experience some live examples of augmented reality in action. So please, if I can ask you now, while you're watching and while we kick off, get your phones ready, get your cameras ready. If you have a camera or if you have a phone like I do that for some reason doesn't read QR codes natively, quickly go and download a QR code reader so that you can follow and experience and enjoy what we're going to be watching today. We'll have a Q&A as ever at the end of the session, so please put your questions in the right-hand side of your screens. You can also chat to each other and say hi. What I would recommend is you will see up above my head on one side of the screen, there's a little icon of a bell. I recommend that you turn that off so that you don't get pinging on your screen on your computer every time somebody leaves a message. But that is it from me. That's all I have to say. I'm delighted now to hand over to Martin and enjoy, everybody. I will see you a bit later.
Great. Well, hi, everybody, and thanks for joining in this session. While I'm waiting for the slides to be transferred across, just a quick reminder, as Josh mentioned, get your phones handy, and if you can read QR codes on the cameras, then great. If not, do download a QR code reader. Because in the next 20 to 25 minutes, what I'd like to share with you really is what is this thing called augmented reality, and really go through the key stages of the what, the why, and the how. What is it? Why should you care? How does it work? And importantly, how are brands using it in the real world? And what I'd like to do is really canter through the what and the why, and then get to the how piece, because then that's where the case studies lie, and you can experience them for yourself by scanning the screen. But to put it all into context, let's start off with a little bit of fun. And here's an example that you could scan for yourselves. So very simply, take your phone out of your pocket, open your camera, and aim your screen or your camera at the QR code to read it. And then once you arrive at the launch page, press launch and aim the camera at the Bombay Sapphire bottle. And what this shows you is Bombay Sapphire, we're trying to teach us as consumers, quite honorably, how to drink more gin. And they turned their packaging and the label on their bottle into an interactive cocktail recipe menu. And when you point your device at the bottle, there's some lovely floral tributes or floral animations that come out of the bottle. But by pressing the rectangles or the video players, you can then launch one of 3 cocktail recipes. And it's a great way of trying to teach consumers how to be more successful at using the brand. And then you could get them to share it on social media and potentially take part in a Mixologist of the Month competition, or register for a discount coupon and drive supplementary purchase, but also feed the CRM platform. And I love to kick off with that because it's a great use case of how a brand is activating their label and their packaging to drive consumption of their product. But to put it into context, what really excites me about this conversation and the world of packaging is that packaging is everywhere. It laces our lives. It's on our kitchen tables. It's in our cupboards. It's on our desks at work. It's in our kids' school bags. But up until now, that packaging has been sat there silently. And it's almost, think of it as an analog proposition in an increasingly digital and, more importantly, a mobile world. Now, with the power of the smartphone and what we'll talk about WebAR in a few minutes, we can activate your packaging to create a dialogue between the brand and the consumer that helps to solve a problem. And that is another point that we'll discuss later on. How can we use that interaction between camera and device to solve problems and deliver a commercial benefit? And as we've spoken to our partners, such as Nestle, Unilever, Beiersdorf, we initially spoke to them about on-pack promotions or communications, but quickly realized that AR can serve the whole consumer journey from the point of consideration through press, digital adverts such as banners, and amplifying their e-commerce presence. Then it can also help the point of purchase at retail, especially now in this post-COVID world where we're, I suppose, being taught to be more considerate about how we pick up and handle products. So AR offers a great solution for contactless retail, where we can scan a product or fixture to learn more about that product without actually having to touch it. And to put it all into context, AR is important because we are all connected, like it or not. The device is disrupting our lives, and we're doing more and more with it, but we're also looking at the world through the lens of the camera. And AR uses this technology and this habit to be able to connect people to your brands. And I love this picture outside a coffee shop, and it potentially says we're a little bit too connected, because I saw a guy at Starbucks, no phone, no tablet, no laptop. He just sat there drinking coffee like a psychopath. And it's a bit of a tongue-in-cheek view of the world, but it just goes to emphasize just how connected to our devices we are. And there is an inherent demand out there for the content that we could be supplying. For example, 66% of people are prepared to spend more on sustainable products, but they find it incredibly difficult to understand who is actually sustainable or not. 78% of us want more information that appears on pack, because the real estate is actually really small. We can help offer them that additional information. Half of us are interested in product provenance, and lots of Gen Zs are interested in unique brand experiences. And if we do that properly, we can deliver a whole raft of value back to the brands. And that can be measured in scans, in pure sales figures, or increasing lifetime value of the consumer. Collecting data, whether that's through first-party email or research data, or even usage of your product. We can get people to share on social media, and if you have an app of your own, we can get that. We can use AR to help drive those downloads. And while I see what we call the surprise and delight moment every time we demo our experiences, we wanted to understand the neuroscience behind the technology. And so we took part in a research project with a company called Neuroscience and the big advertising agency Mindshare. And there's a whole presentation behind it, behind this one slide. But at a very high level, we surveyed just over 120 people to understand what their brain, or how their brain was behaving once they were interacting with print media, websites, tablets, and AR. And I'm delighted to say that we found that when you create an immersive experience, it's proven to be more powerful than traditional media. And it showed that people were almost twice as focused on the AR experience as they were on traditional media. There was almost 3 times as much emotional intensity. So they were totally engaged in the interaction and the animations. And importantly, there was almost a 60% increase in memory retention of the information and the experience, because the user was able to take part and engage with the narrative, as well as the increase in focus. And to finish this section off, scanning is commonplace now. It's no longer just a piece of future gazing, because if you look around us, all the big platforms from Google, Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat, Spotify, Amazon, even LinkedIn and TikTok are doing it. But there is an issue around the media fees and the loss of data and learning by participating in some of these big platforms. But just remember, scanning is commonplace now, and we as consumers understand what to do. So I would implore you not to think about augmented reality, but really to think about, what is your camera strategy? What is your product going to say when people inherently aim their device to find out more about you? And that's what we're here to help you do. And to introduce you to the Zappar platform and the ecosystem, we are a creative or augmented reality consultancy, as well as a content creation platform. And we were launched 10 years ago to democratize this technology, which makes it easy for our partners to create short form bits of infotainment. And short form is really critical. We're not trying to create a Hollywood epic that takes hours to download on a mobile device, even when we're on the move. This has got to be 1 or 2 minutes of good quality content that engages with the consumers and gets our message across. And we can either do that through our creative studio back at the HQ, or partners can use our authoring platform and make the AR content themselves. And this can help you deliver anything from 360 video, 3D animations, mini games, face filters, video sharing, web links, connections to your couponing partners, and so on. And so there's a wide plethora of content that we can create. But the big tipping point for many of our brands and the consumers alike is what's called WebAR. Once upon a time, consumers had to download an app before they could scan a code on their packaging. But actually, as you saw at the very beginning, WebAR is a much more streamlined approach, and it represents a tipping point for adoption from our brands and consumers, because it's almost just a point and shoot. And research by one of our big partners showed that 89% of us know what a QR code is and how to access them. And if we look at research from both Apple and Android devices, we think that there's probably about 82% of global devices that can support QR code scanning through their native cameras. So the technology is now there, ready for mass adoption. And when people scan, there is access to real-time data. We can tell you where the person is, which countries, how often they're scanning, how many people are scanned, their devices, how long, and what they've done in the experience itself. And if we give the user a good enough excuse or reason, we can then help you collect first-party data itself. But before we get into the case studies and thinking about lots of the fun, creative ways that we can activate content, I'd really implore you to think about what your commercial goal is for using AR, and then working backwards to making sure that AR is the right technology. And while this isn't an exhaustive list, it is definitely a good selection of the sort of conversations we have with our partners. And as I mentioned earlier, they include the likes of Nestle, PepsiCo, Beiersdorf, Unilever, and so on. And really pertinent at the moment is a brand purpose. What is the brand? What does the brand stand for? Maybe our provenance, our ingredients, and what is our sustainability story? How are we sourcing our products? And both of those are really important to consumers, but really difficult for them to find the details of, because they're generally hidden deep inside somebody's website. But on the packaging, we can make it a really quick and simple way of surfacing that very important information. As Bombay Sapphire showed us earlier, we can use recipes and tutorials to inspire brand use, to get people more successful at using your brand and maybe trying your brand in different ways. And that's as pertinent for food and beverages as it is for cosmetics. We can use digital rewards such as gaming on the back of cereal packets to drive sales and loyalty. We can create a fun experience that makes people want to share on social media and give you a positive review. We can run competitions to collect personal data, but we can also collect data around people's opinions of your products through research, as we'll see in a case study later on. And of course, we can link back to your e-commerce platforms to help drive your direct-to-consumer proposition. But if you are thinking about developing your own AR campaign, this is probably the one slide that I would implore you take out of this presentation. And it condenses our learning over the last 10 years down into what we call our 3 C's for success. And that boils down to the context that the user is in, the call to action that we give them on the packaging, and then the content itself. So if we drill down into those, the context is the user's physical environment. Think of these as the hygiene factors for scanning. Is it the right time for them to take their phone out and scan? Have they got a hand-free? Have they got Wi-Fi network? So if it's at home, at retail, on a bus, that's great. If they're driving or on a flight, probably not the best time to activate AR. Then we need to think about the packaging design and allocate enough space to put a QR code and some instructions that tell people that AR content exists and how to get it. And a really important part of that call to action is the promise of content that is going to resonate with me as the user. And that's probably the error that QR codes had in the distant past, where people just put a code on there and expected it to change the world. Well, unfortunately, the answer to that is no. But if you promise me as a consumer content that I'm going to find useful, interesting, or enjoyable, then I'm suddenly interested. So I'd implore that we think about the right content for the user's context and then include that in the call to action. Now it's time for some case studies. And this is your chance to get your phone out of your pockets again while I tell you about some of the work that we've done with our partners. So to kick off, here's a project that an external developer, in fact, used the Zappar platform to create the Sipsmith. And the story here was trying to bring the Sipsmith brand to life and introduce the consumer to the Sipsmith barman, who can either teach me to make recipes, going back to the brand education, teach me how to make recipes out of Sipsmith gin. I can then create I can play a mini game. There's a game on the bar that I can tap to play. I can take a selfie and share that on social media. Or I think it's on the little A-frame board in the bottom left-hand corner. I can then take a 360 tour of the Sipsmith brewery. And this is a lovely way of bringing brand personality to life off the packaging to introduce the story and then link people off to different content. So I'll just leave that with you for another minute. Great. So that's a lovely brand experience concept in AR and bringing the brand story to life. Next, we'll move on to a slightly different sector of the market, and on the looking at cereal packs and delivering sort of gaming off the back, but also putting a community action twist to it. because not many people understand that Kellogg's in the US do a lot around supporting sports in schools. So Kellogg's have tried to amplify this across social media, across above-the-line advertising through TV ads and radio and cinema and so on. But they realized that their packaging sits on people's breakfast tables every day, and that is the best billboard. Think about in-home advertising that they have. So they're bringing that story to life. And if you scan the QR code and then aim your device at the packaging, Tony the Tiger will walk in front of the Frosted Flakes pack and tell the story about their mission to help support school sports. And then we're invited to either play a game with throwing an American football at different icons around the screen, or we can take some face filters with Tony and share them on social. Or we can then go and find out more about how Kellogg's are helping schools and take part in that ourselves. So it's a great way of mixing gaming as part of a digital reward for purchasing the product, but also amplifying their CSR, or their corporate social responsibility work that they're doing around schools and sport. So again, I'll just leave that with you for a minute. Okay, let's move on. Now, talking about, moving on to think about the teen audience. This was a great campaign that was actually run a few years ago with our partners at Shazam when they used to run our scanning technology in their app. But the concept from Fanta was they wanted teens to take over the brand and engage with social media influencers to drive people to bricks and mortar retail to buy the product, and then turn the consumer into social media influencers themselves and broadcast the enjoyment they're having with Fanta as a brand. And as I suppose a secondary benefit, they also wanted to collect consumer data. So they engaged with social media influencers who promoted this across their different channels. They also promoted this in cinema ads, drove the kids to retail to buy the product. They would scan and unlock some face filters, which they could share on social, and they could also enter into competitions to win some prizes, so bikes, hoverboards, and so on. And the results were incredible. There was a 10% increase in product sales, but what they also found was that their data capture went through the roof compared to the data harvesting campaigns they used to do online. And there was something around holding the product and having a fun experience with the brand that made the consumers, I suppose, more trusting and willing to hand over their data and opt in the process. So not only did it increase sales and inherently revenue, but they also had huge amounts of social media shares. I think it was in the region of 350,000, but they had probably a 10-fold increase in opted-in data capture from their product packaging. We've got two more experiences to run through before time runs out. And I'd like to share with you a story of salt, which is probably the most utilitarian product that we've ever had to work with. And it was a really interesting concept because Bad Reichenhaller in Germany have a very proud provenance of mining their salt from the pristine mountains in the German Alps. And they were finding that consumers didn't understand or weren't aware of the difference between the heritage of the pure Alpensalt and cheaper imports from God knows where in the world. So they created an AR experience that would immerse the consumer in the beauty of the Alps, take them on a tour of the mines, and then give them recipe ideas of how to use salt in their dishes. So if you scan the QR code and aim the device at the salt packet, then we'll have a lovely little window into a digital world that takes us on a view of the pristine Alps and really sets the scene for where the salt comes from. And you'll see a icon above the chalet or above the, there's a little mine icon up in the distance. You can tap on that to launch some recipes, or then take a 360 tour of their mine to really understand where it comes from. And I was astounded when I learned that over 150,000 people scanned this salt packet within the first couple of months. And it really makes me think that if something as utilitarian as salt can do it, then brands with huge personalities can definitely master this art as well. The last one I'd like to share with you before we wrap up is actually not on PAC itself, but it's thinking about market research and how AR can be used, especially in this COVID scenario, to help with market research and understanding what consumers want of your packaging. This was an example of a project we did with the Lay's brand out of PepsiCo. And the challenge there was to be able to really scale customization of products. In this case, it was a food product, but you can be easily changed to a product packaging, but scale that and integrate it with some traditional market research email questionnaires. So in this case, you scan the QR code or tap on a link from an email survey, and then you launch the AR experience, which gives us a view of the potato chip in this case, but substitute that for a bottle or your packaging. And now we're able to tap on the screen and understand or change different variables of that product design. So it could be the shape, the color, the logo, in this case, it was the density and the pattern of the seasoning. And all of that data, and then once we've created our ideal product, we can then submit that data back to the brand for analysis. And the reason why this was so powerful is because it removed the need for creating lots and lots of sample prototype products, which generally go out into the market with face-to-face surveys. This allowed the consumer to make their own digital prototype and then send that back to the client for analysis. So that brings us up to the end of our sort of introduction into AR. What I hope I've shown you there is the why is it important, and the fact that consumers are obsessed with mobile phones and are demanding more experiences and information from our brands. How it works, that simple scan the QR code or tap on a link to access that information makes it infinitely more available. And then finally, the how. We've shown you a very brief snapshot of just some of the ways that brands are using this content in the real world. And that's the important thing. This is happening now rather than future gazing. So thank you very much.
Martin, thank you so much. And I was really amazed by the salt mine.
Yes.
I was not expecting you to talk about, as you say, it's a very utilitarian product, and I think it's really interesting to see the range of brands who are working with this sort of technology. So thank you for that. We've had a lot of questions from the audience, and in particular, I'm going to pick up on one, which is a debate that has been going on a little bit in the chat room while you've been talking, which is talking about the role of the QR code. And there are out there, as I'm sure you are perfectly aware, technologies which will allow which can do something similar without a QR code being there, where an image can be scanned.
Yes.
So the question, I think the big question sort of arising from this debate in the chat room is, what is the future of the QR code, and is its main purpose to be the call to action to scan it, if that makes sense?
Yes, and there's a couple of key points that you raised there. And to pick up on the first one of, there are other technologies out there that don't need a QR code. And you're absolutely right. Within our own Zappar ecosystem, you can scan, you can download the Zappar app to aim your device at an object and scan a code. You can you can create your own app, and then that can be used for what's called image recognition. So it takes a picture of that packaging. But those solutions need an app, so to tell the camera what to do and what to recognize. The beauty of the QR code, which is making somewhat of a resurgence, is really around this. And the fact that 82+% of devices now have a native QR code reader in the camera. So it removes the whole app piece. And all we need to tell people in terms of that call to action is open your camera and scan the code. So it is the most streamlined solution of getting people on board to your content, your AR experience, or link to your website. It's not that we only work with QR codes or we love QR codes. It's just at this point in time, it is the most streamlined way of getting somebody engaged. And that, for me, that's the simplest way of answering the question of, at this point in time, it is just the simplest way.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Thank you. Excellent. Now, you and I had a little chat before we came online around this, and I want to ask the question. You mentioned 82% of people, or 82% of phones rather, have this native ability to recognize QR codes, which of course is incredibly important in the context of what we're talking about. And you mentioned that there's research to say that a very big majority of the public know what to do with the QR code and what it is.
Yeah.
But clearly, out there in the world, there are some people who will be more connected than others. And are there, from a demographic perspective, particular groups who are more connected than others, or even from a geographical perspective, or from a market perspective, from a product type perspective, areas where this works and where it doesn't?
Yes, it is a really interesting conversation. And I would rewind back to that slide, which we called the 3 C's to success. And it's only natural for us all to think, this is new technology, so it's only for the kids. I don't care about anything else, it's only for the kids. But what we found is that definitely the younger generation are a little bit more curious and exploratory. But if we get the context right, so the user is in the right place for the scanning, we give them the right call to action, so really clearly tell them that AR content exists, and give them content that is right for them and helps them solve a particular problem, then we have seen that it is good for the kids, it's good for the teens, it's good for the 20 and 30 somethings, but we're also working with our partners at Nestle on some of their sort of elder generation products, so that it's easier for them to read and understand what's going on with those products on their device rather than on the real small print of the side of the packaging, where, quite frankly, there's not enough room to put all the information that they need. So it's not the right content to deliver and I'm using huge generalizations, but it's probably not the right content to deliver a 67-year-old or 60 or 70-year-old face filters with Tony the Tiger, but they're probably more interested about product provenance or how to use it properly, or actually just being able to read the ingredients on a device in larger print than appears on the packaging. So it's around what content is right for the consumer.
Okay, great. Martin, we seem to have lost you slightly. While Martin hopefully comes back in just a second, one thing that we were interested in discussing was potentially the role of this sort of AR technology in the new world during, or hopefully soon, post-COVID. I think perhaps we're going to have to wrap it up there because it looks like we've lost Martin and he's not coming back. If you bear with us for a second, I'm just going to try and take him off stage and then try and bring him back. But if not, then I will do a quick wrap up and we'll say thank you very much. Just 1 second. So I have invited Martin to come back on stage. Hopefully we'll have him back in just a moment. Okay, well, it's like the weather. Sometimes we can't control the technology. And that's a great shame that we were cut off halfway through. Oh no, Martin is back.
Yeah. Sorry,
I was just wrapping up, but let's carry on with our discussion then. So I was just saying to the audience, one of the questions that we wanted to touch on was around the opportunities that AR might present in a post-COVID world. Is this something that people are coming to talk to you about at the moment?
Definitely, and I kind of touched on it very briefly in at the beginning of the presentation. We're having quite a few conversations around how do we bring product information to life. Sorry, can you still hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. How do we bring product information to life without people actually touching the product at retail? So we're calling this new phrase contactless retail. And that is really pertinent for quite a few of our brands. And they're activating that from the packaging or from point of sale material in front of their shelf fixture. So it can actually teach people around more about the product before they pick it up. And the other aspect that has been accelerated is the direct-to-consumer proposition. So how do brands start to build a more direct relationship with consumers and onboard them to their clubs or their subscription models?
Interesting. Okay. One of the questions that we had was around, essentially, the question was, what are the increased costs involved in developing AR? But with the permission that I'm going to assume of the person who asked the question, I think we could look at that in a different way and say, typically, which budget does it come from? Is this a marketing budget or is it a packaging budget?
Well, yes, that's an interesting one because different companies work in different ways. Generally, the marketing teams seem to find more benefit in the code itself, or in the experience and the value that they can extract from it. From I suppose a packaging viewpoint, the main considerations are the code is nothing more than just ink, so there is no additional inherent cost there. But we do need to think about the design of that packaging to make sure that the all-important call to action is visible and obvious to the consumer. But it really just depends on, I suppose, where the value is being extracted from the brand. And generally we find it is the marketing teams that have that disposable budget for, I suppose, consumer engagement and education.
Okay. Fabulous, thank you. And then just one last question before we let everybody get on with their day. And that is, as I say every time we do with these, we can't talk about packaging without talking about sustainability. And so could you give us a sense of what the sort of conversations are that you have around sustainability with your customers or with brands? Where does AR fit into that ecosystem?
So sustainability and I'll kind of bucket into that the CSR or corporate social responsibility work into that one piece, because they're both really important to the consumers, and there's both areas that companies do a lot of work in. But unfortunately, that information is really difficult for me as your average consumer to go and find out. So if I have a popular soft drinks brand bottle in my hand, how do I know what it's made of? How do I know why, or is it any better than it was a year ago? What has the brand done to it? And what's the brand doing to support my local community? And that's all information that is really difficult to come by. But if I've got the product in my hand and I'm interested in finding out more, by aiming my device at it, we can surface that information and allow people to understand exactly what work the packaging teams are doing in reducing the amount of plastic or using better plastic, and then empowering me as the consumer to recycle and deal with that packaging in a responsible manner. So maybe at that point, it is the packaging teams who wants to talk about their work, and they may want to pay for it.
Fabulous. Martin, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time today. You've given us some great examples and some great explanations of what the opportunities, some of the challenges, but really, you know, what the exciting things are that the world out there could be doing with AR. So thank you, and it's great to hear from you. I'll just do a very quick wrap up and say we will be back very soon with our next innovation talk. We're working on what the topic and the speaker for that will be, and we will be communicating that very soon. We have set up a page on the ADF and PCD and PLD website where you can all go and consult and watch on replay the webinars and the innovation talks that we have done already. So please feel free to do that and to share the link with your colleagues and your partners around the industry. And also, please do feel free to go and follow us on our social media, on our group, our showcase page on LinkedIn, and our Instagram are the two platforms that we work on particularly. We also have Facebook and Twitter accounts, and you're of course free to follow us there too. But for now, thank you all very much. Wherever you are in the world and whatever part of the packaging supply chain you're in, keep pushing the boundaries, keep innovating, keep doing all that good stuff that you all do on a daily basis. Once again, Martin, thank you so much. It's great to hear from you and great to share your expertise. And we will see you all very soon. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.